the Green Goblin. You love him, you hate him, but you gotta admit, the man's got some unspoken riz. Not only that, but his son Harry Osborn, personally, I think also made a great Green Goblin. I mean, I loved his interpretation in Spider-Man 3, the way that he and Spider-Man fought, and I just watched the movie like yesterday, so I was like, you know what? Let me make an Izuku as Green Goblin. So now we're here. And looking at the thumbnail, this is probably what got you guys to click on this video. And now you're gonna stay. So you might as well go down below and hit that like button. Maybe even consider hitting that red button so you're updated on all my future videos. But with that said, the thumbnail for today's video was made by iCare. You can find her link down below on Instagram. And I do hope you guys go on to enjoy today's What If, because they put a lot of time into it and it's short, sweet, and straight to the point. That said, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We start a story in the perspective of a 4-year-old Izuku. Now, it's at this moment that he was just told that he's quirkless. We know how that goes. He ends up going back to school, where he immediately tells his friend group, which is Bakugo and his lackeys, hey guys, I don't have a quirk. They all laugh at him. They tell him that he's a loser, that he can't hang out with them. And from that day, Izuku's given the nickname Deku. Every day he would try to still hang out with them, but it was as if they shunned him. He would get picked on, pushed, and just bullied. He was that one kid that nobody really wanted in their group. They just felt bad for him. And Izuku was always treated like complete garbage. He hated it, but they were his only friends, and Izuku figured he couldn't find any else, so he'd rather just stick by them than be alone. He did this for so long that eventually one day, when Izuku finally ended up turning the age of 8 after constant, everyday bullying, Bakugo finally decided to go a little further on this day. Izuku was in the cafeteria just eating his lunch. He saw Bakugo and Izuku pulled the seat out for him. He was like, Bakugo, hey, come sit next to me. Suddenly, we see Bakugo say, yeah, sure, Izuku, catch. He throws an explosion full power at Izuku by accident, and it ends up burning some of his face, pretty much damaging his eye and leaving him with a permanent scar that will be a reminder of this day. Izuku falls to the ground and begins screaming, ah, Bakugo! Ah, my face! And Bakugo just looks at him. He's like, Izuku, I'm sorry. The teachers come in and they begin literally smacking Izuku in the face, trying to put the fire out. They get it out before it can get too bad and spread throughout all his face, but he gets a pretty decently sized scar, and he loses partial vision from one of his eyes. Izuku, that same day, was rushed to the hospital, and a week later, a report was filed on the incident. There was a camera in the cafeteria, and when Inko ended up mentioning the fact that there was video footage of the incident, she said that Bakugo should definitely get expelled for it. But you know what the school did? They deleted the files. They said, Miss Inko, we are so sorry that this happened, but there's no way that we could expel him. It'll go in his permanent record. It'll affect his hero status. We both know as well as, anybody else does that Bakugo's gonna go on to become a great hero. We can't tarnish that. Having a hero come from our school, we need something like that. We're sorry, but Izuku's just gonna have to put up with it. We can help you move him to another school, but that's all we can do. Inko is furious, and even Mitsuki is angry at Bakugo, but she's glad that nothing ended up happening. She ends up giving him a stern talking to, and Bakugo would just smirk at Izuku while he's taken out of that room and essentially ends up developing this huge hatred for him that's never really gonna go away. Izuku always has this permanent reminder of Bakugo and the thing that he did to him. Izuku ends up getting transferred to school where things are helped out a bit, but people still bully him. I mean, he's still that quirkless kid. He has no friends. And Izuku, realizing this, just decides that whatever. He does have one thing that nobody else does. He's smarter than anyone else. He could have just claimed that he has an intelligence quirk, but what good will that do him? I mean, Izuku at the end of the day will be looked at as a freak, a loser, the outcast, that random kid that nobody likes. So Izuku just decides, whatever. If I can't do that, then if I can't become a hero, then I guess I'll just become a hero support item creator or something like that. He ends up becoming smarter, reading books day by day. Every single day, Izuku studies for hours on end, and Izuku tries his absolute hardest to become smart, every day learning college level math, equations, and learning technical things when it comes to building gadgets is a normal thing for him. This boy just gets smarter and smarter as the days go by, and what essentially would end up happening is basically we would get to the time when Izuku just ends up turning about the age of 10 years old. Izuku at this point still hasn't had his hatred for all heroes, and instead he only focuses on Bakugo, thinking to himself that not every hero is probably like that, it's just Bakugo. He's a villain if anything, is all that Izuku could even think, because I mean, what else should he think? So eventually, like I said, Izuku's 10 years old when he ends up seeing Endeavor on the street. He goes over to him to ask for an autograph, but Endeavor just gives him that same stare that Bakugo gave him. That get away from me, kid. He has a similar experience to what Inasa did in Canyon, and if you guys don't know who that is, that's the Wind Kid who is having big problems with Todoroki. He ends up having a pretty bad experience, and he ends up just classifying all heroes like this. Ends up thinking that maybe heroes aren't as happy as they claim to be. Maybe there is some bad eggs out there, but that doesn't mean they're all bad, right? Izuku has a glimpse of hope, praying that these heroes aren't truly like that. But what good is it if he has nothing else? Eventually though, what ends up happening is that he grows a small hatred for heroes, but decides that, might be not, they're all not corrupt. However, one day, when Izuku's about 10 and a half, he comes home to find out that his mother had died. And with his father leaving to get the milk at a young age, Izuku had nowhere to turn to. Cause of death? A hero accident. A hero was too late to save her. Not only that, but she was pretty much sacrificed to end up catching the villain. If he would have let the villain go, his mother would have survived. That was the last straw for Izuku. No more heroes are this, heroes are that. All his life, Izuku has been shown that heroes are nothing but worthless garbage that should be taken out of the streets. They're not protectors. They never protected anything. His mother died, he has a scar, and the number 2 hero, he's a piece of crap. What does Izuku have to turn to? Nobody. He ends up being thrown in an orphanage, and well, Izuku would again be known as that smart, quiet kid. One day though, when he's getting picked on by the kids, he decides that he's had enough of everything. Izuku at this current point would be about 11 years old, having dealt with months of constant picking from all the other orphans who would constantly put him down anytime somebody would want to adopt him, saying, did you know he's quirkless? Izuku's tired. He's tired of feeling useless. He's tired of being berated as if he's nothing. It's getting annoying, and Izuku's on his last straws. But something good does come out of this. Izuku decides, you know what? I'm not gonna just act like I'm sad. I'm not gonna act like this is gonna affect me. I'm gonna put my head up and I'm going to make a difference in the world. I'm not gonna become some villain. I'm not gonna become what this world is making me. He ends up deciding to pack a bag with a couple of his things and essentials and leave. A week would pass and Izuku decided to finally make it on his own. He would kind of clean windows where cars were, driving by, and that's how Izuku would scrap together a couple of dollars. Due to the fact that he was young, people would give him a little bit of extra money, and Izuku would barely manage to survive out on these streets, managing to get a hotel at any time that he was a little bit lucky, and Izuku would just go by with his life going on just like this. Eventually though, one day Izuku would be in an alleyway when he would witness a strange man hold a hand out to him. Izuku looks at him and asks him what he's doing there, and it would be revealed to be All For One, who would be standing before him telling him that he has an offer for him. He could join him as a villain. He could become a part of his army. He'll give him a home, a place where he'll be accepted. A quirk doesn't matter. He can offer him power. With his intelligence, he could become a great asset. And Izuku, hearing this, would think to himself that, well, that's a great offer. He's not just gonna go accepting anything now. And All For One would say, I wouldn't expect you to. The offer will still stand. Meet me here tomorrow if you want to join. Izuku goes on to have one of the worst days of his life. He gets beat to a pulp by some random thugs. A hero was nearby, and he was too slow to stop him. Izuku decides, that's it. That's the last straw. And he ends up going to meet All For One, where eventually he's greeted to Shigaraki Tamura. Not only but he's also greeted with Kurogiri and a couple of other villains that they had early on. Izuku during this time would be told by All For One that he can have all of the money, all of the resources that he will need to use his intellect to help the League of Villains. Izuku would say that his first thing on his agenda is to help himself, and All For One would say, by all means, boy, help yourself. He begins working underneath Dr. Ujiko, learning things about the human body and psychology, learns things about healing people, and ends up actually delving into the nomification process just a bit. For his own special project that Izuku wants to work on, he wants to create a serum that could give him unrivaled super strength, something that could help him keep up with that of these fake heroes. And Izuku, by the time that he turned 14 years old, would have ended up developing this perfect Goblin serum, which actually ends up twisting and corrupting his personality. So he ends up gaining twisted, split personality symptoms, and he also ends up becoming more dark, more twisted, more, what's the word? More like psychotic? Nah, that's not the word. I don't know. I'll comment it down below later. But anyways, he ends up basically becoming a lot darker, and during this time, Izuku would have ended up developing the technology that the Green Goblin uses, also developing his own costume with a little bit of help from All For One. Izuku during this time would have ended up becoming a lot more powerful, and with his ability of actually training under villains, was able to actually learn hand-to-hand combat very well. Eventually, by the point that Izuku was 14 years old, All For One decided that they would need somebody to spy on UA, that they are going to be having to destroy that entire school and get rid of everything that UA stands for. Izuku's all for it. I mean, destroying the Hero Society from its core, starting with the pro hero students of the future, Izuku couldn't ask for anything better than that. So Izuku decides, sure, I'll go on this mission. He ends up making his way towards the entrance exam area, where he goes on to ace the test because of his super intellect. And when it comes to fighting against the robots, Izuku would use his enhanced strength as well as a support item that he was actually allowed to bring in, which was the jet glider, to actually go in there and begin to essentially dismantle a bunch of these robots, getting just enough points to actually make it in, one of the third last people to make it into class 1A. Not trying to stand out too much, Izuku purposefully failed a couple of the questions on the test. Not only that, but also didn't exactly use his full strength against the robots, getting a grand total of about 30 robot points. When it came to the rescue points, some other kid was the one responsible for saving Uraraka. And actually, no, not some other kid, but some random pro hero. They just, let's say that they turned the 0-pointer off, so she was fine. And when it comes to Izuku, what ended up essentially happening was basically Izuku ended up getting into UA class 1A, taking Aoyama's spot in the original, because this time around, he never ends up getting that naval laser quirk from All For One. By the way, my bad if I just spoiled you guys on who the traitor is, but I'm pretty sure if you keep up with My Hero Academia content and what ifs, you probably have already spoiled yourself a couple of times. I'm just guessing. That said though, what ends up essentially happening is we have Izuku ending up making his way towards UA for the first day of classes, and once he's there, he ends up catching a glimpse of a certain boy that he never wanted to see again. Izuku at this current time looks exactly like the one in the thumbnail, with the scar, the discoloration of his eye, and the second that he lays his eyes on him, Izuku wants nothing more than to kill Bakugo. I mean, killing people isn't a rarity for Izuku. He's had to do his fair share of missions for All For One, where he was responsible for the death of a couple of heroes, anonymously of course. But when Bakugo sees Izuku, he stops arguing with Ida and says, well, looks like you ended up actually coming far. What are you doing here, quirkless loser? You have nothing, dude. What are you even doing here? Izuku looks to Bakugo, doesn't say a word, makes his way back to the desk, and he ends up crushing the UA leg, like, you know, one of the legs that holds the desk up. Izuku squeezing it as hard as he can, trying his hardest not to just rip Bakugo limb from limb right there. Editing Zether here, I completely forgot to throw in the sponsor of the video, so here it is. As anime fans, we love to show our support to our favorite shows by rocking anime apparel. But something I'm pretty sure we can all agree on is it's so expensive. So I've partnered up with Fandom to bring you all affordable, high quality anime merch that you are sure to love. And if you use my code ZETHER at checkout, you can even get an extra 10% off the already affordable merch. Keep in mind, it does come from overseas sellers, so its sizing is going to be different since it's overseas. That said, let's get back into the video. Bakugo begins to berate Izuku, and Aizawa gets up and glares at Bakugo, telling him that one more incident like that and he will be expelled gladly. Bakugo gets a little intimidated by this, and from here they go outside to have the quirk assessment test, where all of them end up getting pretty decent scores, and Izuku just ends up kind of pretending to be quirkless, using a little bit of that enhanced strength, saying that he's simply been training. Saying that he is still quirkless, but he's just been training so hard that now his muscles allow him to have a bit of almost superhuman strength. And with support items, it's almost a breeze for Izuku to get by some things. He's of course not allowed to use support items during the quick apprehension test, but he's able to squeeze by just enough so that he's about the 5th place. He's in 5th place. Not exactly too outstanding, but not the worst. The person who ends up being failed this time around is actually going to be consisting of Invisible Girl. I mean, she has no quirk. I'm pretty sure she had the lowest stats. Mineta at least was able to get the side-to-side jump, so I'm just going to be stating that Invisible Girl is actually the one who gets expelled this time around. That said, oh, hold on. Alright, I'm back. Some car came by blasting some random radio station, and I didn't want you guys to hear it. Sorry if you did hear a little bit of it, but you know, we'll get past that. Anyways, though, what ends up basically happening following the quirk apprehension test is Izuku simply makes his way home. He's opting to stay low-key, and on his way home, Bakugo actually ends up running next to Izuku, telling him that, you know, he just got lucky back there, informing Izuku that he's going to be making sure that he gets expelled by the end of the month, saying that that little scar isn't the only thing that Bakugo is going to be doing to him. Izuku, hearing this, would look at Bakugo with these eyes of just pure hatred and bloodlust. And Bakugo, seeing this look in Izuku's face for the first time, would actually take a couple of steps back in genuine fear of what Izuku would have done to him had it not been for his mission and him knowing to control his temper just barely enough. He ends up walking off, and Bakugo says, "I'll catch you in class, Izuku, or should I say, Deku." As from here, he walks off scoffing, and Izuku makes his way back to the League of Villains organization, where he goes on to inform All For One that he's having a hard time holding his cool around that Bakugo Katsuki kid. All For One looks to Izuku and says, "You really don't like that kid, do you?" And Izuku says, "I hate him. I hate him with every fiber of my being. I want him dead." All For One looks to him and says, "We can't have him killed, but we could kill someone else close to him." Izuku looks to All For One and he would say that he'll handle it. Izuku says, "No, let me." And from here, he ends up suiting up in a different Green Goblin costume, something that Bakugo would never recognize. The next day of school, which was essentially the Heroes vs. Villains event, Izuku wasn't actually present in class, saying that he ended up getting a huge migraine. And instead, while Bakugo was at his class, Izuku ended up undergoing a stealth mission in which he ended up breaking into the house of Katsuki Bakugo and murdering both of his parents, using the pumpkin bombs to actually leave them in nothing but their skeletal states. So when Bakugo ended up arriving back at home, he witnessed both of his parents' bones and ashes, as he was left with nothing but a letter stating "good riddance." Izuku, at this same time, was essentially, actually no letter was left for Bakugo, but Bakugo just got angry, sad. He lost all senses of his emotions. And Bakugo from here was actually let stay at UA via Nezu's understanding of, you know, his parents' death. Izuku returns back to school and he sees Bakugo in this dark, gloomy, angry mood, worse than usual. Bakugo, wanting to find somebody to take it out on, turns to Izuku and says, You, I'll take it out on him." But then he looks to Aizawa, and Aizawa just looks at him with those quick cancellation eyes, telling him, "Remember, kid, one more of those, you're expelled. I don't care about your parents' death. It happens, kid. Life's unfair." Bakugo looks to him and wants to scream out something, but he can't. He knows that this is all he has left, and if he loses this school, well, he'll fail his parents. Bakugo clenches his teeth and with all his might ends up holding his fist together. Eventually, a week of school would pass and everybody would have to get their permission slips line to go to the USJ event. Izuku would get his signed by All For One, saying that he's his foster guardian, and Izuku makes his way to the school, where eventually they all arrive on the bus with Ida as the school president thingy whatever, would end up telling them all to get off the bus in orderly fashion. They go on to meet the hero 13, and it is here at the USJ where Izuku is finally allowed to let out his real intentions. The second that Izuku arrives at the USJ, the first thing that Izuku would do with his hero costume would be to click a button on his arm, which essentially causes his glider to fly through the roof and arrive actually piercing into Bakugo's gut, sending him flying as Izuku jumps onto it and flies through the USJ with Bakugo's blood squirting everywhere, and Izuku punching Bakugo constantly until he falls into the water, and the villains that were in the water actually end up rushing to him, ripping him apart limb from limb. Izuku, following this, would say it's a great day to be a villain as he throws pumpkin bombs at the hero students, and all of those who are weak and would get killed by this, with the exceptions of Todoroki, Kirishima, would essentially end up being killed by these apparent explosions. 13 would go to shoot her portal quirk at Izuku, which would actually cause him to slightly be terrified because he began feeling his body's matter get pulled towards 13. Kurogiri created a portal which ended up reversing those effects, and Aizawa would look to Izuku before saying, "You're a traitor, aren't you?" Izuku would say, "Guilty as charged," and from here he would turn towards Aizawa before engaging in hand-to-hand combat, in which Izuku begins to completely dismantle Aizawa. Shigaraki would make his presence known and would yell out, "Where is All Might? We're here to kill him and these students." He goes on to scratch at his neck and say, "Kurogiri, Nomu." And the Nomu would be brought out to the scene, where it would screech out with all of its might. And suddenly, we would see the entirety of all of the UA students who were there present would essentially get killed. All Might was never notified by Ida, since he ended up being one of the people who were killed by the pumpkin bomb, and with the ability of them having a user who could actually jam the signal, everybody present in the USJ that wasn't a villain ended up dying. The villain side were successful in taking out multiple hero students, killing Bakugo, and even taking out Aizawa and 13, one of the only people who could have potentially become threats, which is extremely impressive. The Nomu didn't even get the chance to even fight against anybody, and that entire attack was praised by All For One towards Shigaraki and Izuku, who were both responsible for what had just transpired back there. They both would go on to tell All For One that they're thankful for his praise, and from here, All For One goes on to inform Izuku that he's now officially second in command. During this time, Izuku is not allowed to show his face back at UA, and because of this, Izuku is actually, how do I put this, going to be essentially working on his second stage Goblin costume, which is essentially going to be the one from the Marvel comics with all of its extra gadgets. It's going to be a super techy version of the Green Goblin suit. Nothing like the one that the Harry Osborn from the Amazing Spider-Man had, because that one's just ugly. More like the Harry Osborn incarnation. That one looks really sick to me personally. That said though, what ends up essentially going on from here is UA school as a whole gets shut down. I mean, there was so many deaths and carnage that ended up happening on that day, and the entire school ended up essentially getting shut down. From here, the League of Villains Association just went on to essentially go through with just pointless killing. Day after day, people would begin getting killed, and it became a thing where the League of Villains just began completely going after heroes regardless of status, regardless of if they were pros. Number one, All For One eventually ended up targeting All Might, and via a fight in which Izuku was actually present, as well as the rest of the League of Villains, they ended up catching All Might off guard. All Might ended up getting killed by All For One, and it just became an absolute stomp. It's insane, but it's what happens. Izuku being the Green Goblin essentially just leads Izuku to fester all this hatred, all this rage at the heroes that Izuku never would have had otherwise. And yeah, that's what I believe would happen if Izuku was the Green Goblin. What did you guys think of this what if? Did you guys think it was too short? Did you guys maybe think that I could have done more with it? What did you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments. And with that said, make sure to like the video, subscribe, check out the channel artist down below, and also go check out my other My Hero Academia what ifs that I have on the channel that you guys are sure to love. Like my what if Deku was Gohan's reincarnation. That one's sick. I personally really like that one. That said, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Zether. I'm out. Peace.